Bloodwash is an indie horror game going for a retro aesthetic on multiple fronts, from visual to plot. The Steam page touts crusty PS1 style graphics, narrative focused horror experience, giallo inspired plot, first person so anything can sneak up on you, drenched with gore, and that you can play in normal or VHS mode for extra grime. Now, it claims PS1 style graphics, but the models look less PS1 and more Quake 1. While they're a similar era of 3D, if you've ever played Quake, you know Quake. That being said, the humans in-game are less like the odd, blocky people in early 3D games and look more like an early 3D rendition of a cheap blow-up doll. I get it, it makes wrapping the textures around the models all that you need to do in order to make a whole new character. But the thing about that is, there are only approximately 12 or 13 characters in the whole game with models.
Whatever, bitch.
I understand working on a low budget, and going for retro aesthetics can help with that, but if a bit more detail went into these, it would improve the atmosphere of the game. Like how the old lady who is crouched over, yet somehow taller than my college-age character? Instead, it was like a magician about to saw his assistant in half, but the skin color of her torso didn't match the skin color of her legs, thereby ruining the immersion of the performance. A greater flaw in the game is the overuse of jump scares accompanied by a blaring audio cue. Despite claiming to be a game with a giallo-inspired plot, giallo being a genre of Italian murder mystery, thriller, and horror films dating back as far as the early 1960s, the ocular design more in line falls with the mid-90s to current-day horror films. Every jump scare is accompanied by an audacious effect that belongs in the bin, not in my ears. While playing this game, I wanted to throw my ears in the bin, due to one of the sound effects basically just being ear rape a la early YouTube poops. Overall, the audio design is somewhat poor. There are voice actors in this game.
Well, you're out late. Just a heads up, we're closing soon. Feel free to hang out until then, though.
And while their performances do give a cheesy slasher vibe, a more pressing matter is the lack of consistency. There are some clear performances, and some that sound like the actor recorded their performance with a cheap pair of headphones with the mic slapped on the cord.
Hello? Is anyone there? This is the police. If anyone is there, then come out now.
Considering the VHS filter the game has on by default, a suggestion I would make is to downsample the audio to a lower quality for all voices,
furthering the grimy atmosphere by adding a rough, distorted texture to the sound.
Something I really can't show due to not wanting to spoil the plot, but a problem nonetheless, is the animation. And by animation, I really mean the lack thereof. When an animation plays out for a cutscene, Bloodwash uses a very distracting fade transition, making models appear out of nowhere. It's mostly evident in one cutscene right at the climax of the game. Few animations are used in one or two scenes, but they're only passable at best. Unfortunately, as with many scenes of this game, I cannot show these animations without spoiling the plot, predictable as it may be. Speaking of the plot, I won't spoil the plot, because this game is so short and so cheap, but the game flaunts as a selling point that it's narrative focused. Having a focus on narrative is not a bad thing. I play my games for both story and gameplay. Heck, I play visual novels, which have like no gameplay and all story. However, the story presented is, shall we say, lackluster, predictable. The ending especially so. You play as Sarah, a pregnant college student. She lives in abject poverty with her deplorable alcoholic boyfriend. The laundry room of her apartment complex is out of order, so she rides a bus in the middle of the night to a 24/7 laundromat on the edge of town so she'll have clean clothes for a job interview the next morning. The news is flooded with stories of a serial killer known as the Womb Ripper, who, as the name implies, kills pregnant women. Creepiness ensues. So far, I have been fairly critical of a small game by a small team. But I say these criticisms not to fling mud, but to show where the game could improve. Where the team can improve. I don't want to end my review on a negative note, So here are some aspects that I found enjoyable. I was really drawn into the atmosphere with the filters on. The VHS filter could use some improvement in a few aspects, but it added to the atmosphere greatly. The nighttime strip mall with these small shops and tons of flavor text transposed me into the game's world. The small pizzeria with its 3-hole arcade machines reminded me of a place in my town, a local sandwich shop that has 2 machines, both broken. One of those cabs is Mortal Kombat. The CD appliance shop reminded me of the old Sears store we had, which was also on a strip mall in my town. It shut down many years ago, as many other Sears have. The pawn shop, funnily enough, is also like my hometown, being located near that particular Sears. The contrast of small-town familiarity mixed with the uncanny visuals created an eerie, yet cozy ambiance. Another saving grace of this game is the small distractions, like the Atari Lynx you get at the laundromat, or the arcade game at the pizzeria. Buddy, I never expected to see a reference to the godforsaken Atari 2600 video game adaptation of The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That game was awful. Played it in my computer lab in high school on a random retro game site 4 years before the AVGN episode on the game. Dumb game, never play it. Besides the whole 2 minigames, you actually get a total of 7 comic books in-game. Real, full-on comics you could read with over 20 pages each. I really liked the one called Sin Eater. We'll definitely see about finding more out on that one. In the end, would I recommend Bloodwash? I mean, it's like only an hour to beat, maybe 1.5 to 2 hours to get all the achievements, and read all the comic books. At the base asking price of $7.99, yeah, I'd pick it up, despite the flaws. I mean, it's basically the length of a horror movie, and $7 is pretty cheap for a movie ticket. On top of that, you get 7 comics, and normally a single comic can cost as much as like $3.50 an issue. I don't really enjoy numerical ratings for games. They're rarely indicative of a game's true quality due to larger publications and their policies. But if I were to give it a score, I'd say it's a solid 5 dryer sheets out of 10. Average, but with room for potential.